This might just look like some old camcorder, but actually these are really useful. It's a Sony TRV120E Digital 8 camcorder, and these are very useful in the video transfer business because they can directly capture out to Firewire from Video 8 and High 8 and Digital 8 in standard play and long play on both PAL and NTSC recordings. So they're extremely flexible. The only thing they don't do is PCM digital audio sound, but that's relatively rare anyway. And they produce good results. They have a built-in digital time-based corrector, and the output you get from these, the image quality is really nice, and stereo as well. So they're highly sought after, quite valuable, still fetch quite a lot of money on eBay and similar. Really like the TRV120E Digital 8 camcorder from Sony.
It's a sad day. My much loved TRV120E Sony Digital 8 camcorder has finally bitten the dust in the way that I always knew it would. The Sony TRV120E, just about the best Digital 8 camcorder that Sony ever made. The problem is it always had one fatal flaw. The eject button would just stop working. So you can have a perfect camcorder and it just stops. And no matter how you press it, cajole it, caress it, give it the Sony slap, it just won't open. Now I know you don't do repairs, Colin, but it might be worth having a bash at this one, see if you can save it.
But I can't take on repairs. I have a backlog of my own equipment to work on. So I'm sorry, Chris, I really can't help you with this.
Special delivery.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll have a look at it then. So we have in here a TRV120E, I think. Okay, TRV120E, which is possibly one of the best Digital 8 camcorders for digitising tapes. And where our problem is that this panel opens up, and as it opens and closes, it stresses the flexi cable there inside here, which works the control panel at the top and the eject button underneath, and eventually it fractures and it won't open anymore. Right, we're also missing the strap there, but so be it. Right, I'm going to go and get a power supply for this, and let's demonstrate the problem. Not sure that's working. Okay, so it's powered up on this power supply. The first one I tried didn't work, so I may look at that later. Press the display button. Oh, display doesn't work either. Normally you press the display, something would come up on here, but nothing. Maybe it doesn't without a tape in it. Okay, let's try eject. And there is our problem. We're in player mode. I got the display to work. Don't know why that wasn't working earlier. None of these are lit up. This should all be backlit. But does that do so without a tape in there? Can't quite remember. But we can't get eject to work. Sometimes when this is starting to fail, if you half close it, you can get it to do the eject, but no. Right, our object of the exercise is not necessarily to fix the whole control panel, because you can always operate the thing by remote control or via the DV connection remote control, which is being used for capture. But what we don't have is any way of operating the eject button via remote control that I'm aware of. We don't know if there's a remote control code for eject that we could send it, but I don't believe so. I will say that when I've in the past repaired this, I've tended to mess up the spring on the zoom control, which doesn't matter. This is going to be play only, but it's a little bit sad that I always manage to mess that up. Right, so the first thing I'm going to have to do is take some of the cabinet work off and get to the flexi cable. I have done a video in the past where I do this, and replaced the whole of the flexi cable and control panel. But on that occasion I had a scrap camera that I could take that from. On this occasion I don't have a scrap, so we're going to have to repair what we've got or find another way to fabricate an eject button. Right, let's get started. There are a million screws to undo, and I don't always remember exactly which ones we have to undo. Fortunately on the Sony ones, most of them are the same size. It doesn't use millions of different screw sizes where it's not necessary on the Sony ones. Also, the screws here have got arrows on them which tell you they're the ones you need to take off in order to take the cabinet off. And on the Sony ones you have to pull the front off in order to gain all the access you need to take it apart. Okay, I had a little bit of sticky tape which I had to pull off this connector here in order to remove the cable from the mode switch here, well, the switch for the different modes. So that was a little bit fiddly. You could have left it on, but there's a danger of that getting damaged with all the jostling that's going to happen. Okay, big flexi cable to undo here. This is one of the ones where you have to fold the securing tab out of the way before you undo it. Okay, that will do for now. I'm struggling with this cable. I don't want to force it. So, this gets us enough access, I think. Right, we'll take apart this, which is the underneath of the eject button and the control panel at the top, and we'll see where the flexi cable is and what we're going to do about it. I think, from memory, the flexi cable in question is folded up here and sticky taped down. I think that's our problem one. Like I said, in the past when I've done this I've messed up the zoom switch. I think a spring or something flies off and I never managed to get it back. Okay, let's carefully release this bottom part of the control panel. Why is it stuck down at this end? There we are, just needed a little bit of easing out. There's the spring that I always manage to get into trouble with. It always fires itself across the room. And there you can see this cable here goes that way and emerges here, and that is indeed the one that is connected to the control panel. Okay, here's the other end of the flexi cable, and it's actually completely broken. So no chance of any connections at all working in that. Every single one of them has severed. And that goes into connector at the bottom here, which is a little fiddly. Okay, so that's the other end of the cable disconnected. Now we need to remove this part, like so. Now what of course the book would tell you to do is to completely replace this whole control panel, but you can't get one. One of the buttons has fallen off. Which one is that? That's the photo button, I think, from up there. So I need to put this out of the way so that it doesn't fall to pieces while I work on this with a microscope, and well, we have to come up with some ideas, don't we? So take away the metal panel, take off the plastic button section. So this is what we should replace, but we don't have one. So I've put together the two broken pieces just to show how they should be. So that's where the break is, right there. Now what can I do? How am I going to make all those contacts? And how many are there? There's ground plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, okay, it's only the eject we really need, but it'd be good to have all of them, wouldn't it? Which is the eject signal? We could work that out. That's a button on the underside. Okay, so that's eject there. The one that's out on a little island, peninsula you might say. And looking at the traces, one side is common to the big ground plane, and the other is this track here, goes to a test pad I think. It's actually the first signal on that side. So as a minimum we need to reconnect the ground and the first track here to this end as an absolute minimum to just get eject back. Now I could possibly connect up some more flexi cable, but the weird thing is that this doesn't have a uniform track spacing, so that makes it rather hard. I can't use a piece of flexi cable from a scrap camera of a different model that has a uniform pitch. And anyway, how am I going to solder to this stuff? I can solder to that big earth contact easily, but the rest of the contacts will be tricky. So it's going to be challenging. I could, I suppose, go straight from this test point here, if I can get to that. Is it available on the other side? Yes. I could go from that point there with a wire all the way through to this far end, or somewhere along here. I might be able to do that and get just the eject function back, because I could run some very thin wires just from the ground position and our test pad here, if it is test. I could run those through to the flexi cable. Could I solder to these points here? Oof. I think that would make it difficult to insert, so I don't think that's on. If I take this insulation off, can I solder to it? I've got nothing to lose to try, have I? I'm only going to damage the end, which is already damaged, so I could try that. Okay, I have bare copper for the ground and at the first contact, so maybe I can solder some very small wires to those. We'll only restore the eject function this way, but you know, that's what we need to do. Okay, I may have a solution to connecting to these really thin tracks on here. Some 0.1mm enamelled wire, and you can see I have managed to solder a little wire to the tricky trace. This is the one which is the eject button. This side is quite simple, but that was the tricky one. So now I should be able to run a length of that up to somewhere on the main part. You could argue I could, you know, do them all. What do you reckon? I think I'd end up with a heap of short circuits, but in theory I could actually connect them all. It's a lot of extra work, and with the eject button we've got a fairly easy sort of test point on the board, well, on the flexi up here. But if I was to connect them all, I'd probably have to connect them somewhere along here. It's a lot more work, and it's a lot more difficult to handle the fact that there's going to be a bending point in here somewhere. I think I'm going to do just the eject connection for now. So let's give it a decent amount of wire. And now solder the next one. First thing I have to do when I'm dealing with this wire is tin it and burn off the insulation. If you just put solder on, you can't guarantee you're making a connection. You really have to let the solder burn through the insulation for a good few seconds. I used to do a lot of work years ago with wire wrap. Wire pen, that was it, wire pen, that used enamel coated wire like this, and you'd have to burn through the insulation on that. I built an entire frequency counter out of TTL chips using wire pen. There we go, that's worked. Okay, I'm going to solder the two wires up to the far end. So this is the ground point, which I'm picking up at the 0 ohm resistor. And this is the eject signal, which I'll pick up at what I think is a test point. I'll just check they work as well. Good. So it's just a matter of reassembling this in such a way that the wires I've soldered on don't take too much bending force. Okay, I'll sticky tape the two pieces together, and electrically that should work. Unfortunately, there's no way of testing it just at the moment. Well, is there? If I was to put this if I was to reconnect that to its socket here, even with this big cable disconnected, would I have enough to be able to do eject? Actually, I could just reconnect that as well, couldn't I? Okay, let's do that. Let's test it before we go any further. Now, the way it was originally installed, I think the way they did it is they fed the wire through this slot here and plugged it into that socket, and then pushed through the surplus and folded it up under this sticky tape. I think that's the way it was constructed. So we're going to have to do more or less the same thing. Okay, so we're looking down on the camera here. We're about to feed the cable through this slot behind the control panel, and then we need to plug it in. Yeah, refitting this connector is extremely fiddly. Right, I think I've managed to refit that. It was extremely difficult to refit that connector. Now, hopefully, I may need to refit this, otherwise you might just find that the whole machine shuts down. So I'll refit this multi-way connector here, and then let's see if I can operate the eject mechanism. And this is the eject button here. Okay, let's power it up. It won't power up because we haven't connected this here, which has got the power switch. So we need to reconnect that one. Okay, try again. And now try the eject button here. Right, that's what we're aiming to do. Okay, we can reassemble it. Right, as far as I can, I'm going to reassemble all the bits and pieces in this top, even though they mostly won't work. This is the spring I always get into trouble with. At least keep all the parts in so that it could one day be repaired. Now, the original bend was here on the flexi cable, but I'm leaving the cable in a different position So we'll have a lot more cable at this end, which is going to be hard to store, but it'll move the bend from there to further along the cable. Now, eject is unusual in this design in that all the other buttons are on the top, but eject is on the bottom from this direction. Right, I've missed a part out. I've missed out the light guide for the operation buttons. I know it doesn't matter because we're not going to be using it, but I still want it in place. I do think Sony made this whole assembly much more complicated and unreliable than it needed to be. Oh, my sticky tape is broken, which doesn't matter because we're not using that connection, but okay. Another quick test, I think. No, eject is not working now. I've broken my wire somewhere. That's the eject button and it's not working, so I've broken something. Yeah, one of my wires has come free, so I need to fix that. Yeah, it's the smaller of the two wires, of course, that's broken, so the earth connection, the ground connection's on, but the signal connection from the eject is not, so I need to solder that back on again and try to secure it a little bit better. Right, I'll do that off camera because I'll be using a microscope again and I'm running short of space here. Actually, the wire I'd broken was not the signal, it was the ground connection, which was a little easier to solder. So let's see if that works now. Good. Right, so I need to secure all this before reassembling. Okay, it's reassembled. Of course, only the eject button will work. Nothing else is correct here at all. But let's just check eject works, and if it does, we'll finish the reassembly. Good. Let's finish fitting the cabinet. Let's check that it plays a tape before I complete all the reassembly. I missed out the remote control receiver. Yes, it needs the remote control receiver. Okay. Okay, that's working. Can't always seem to get the display operation to work for some strange reason. That was playing up earlier. It worked in the end. Maybe just a bad button. Yep, all functions are working. And eject. Good. Do final reassembly then. Alright, just lots of screws to do up now. And I will go onto a computer in a moment and just check that the Firewire port works as well, because of course it's being used for digitisation, so that's absolutely vital.
So you've managed to get it fixed? That's brilliant.
Well, yes, the eject button works, and I've checked that the Firewire function works, so you can capture video with it.
Did you get all of the other buttons sorted as well?
No, I bloody well didn't fix all the functions. You wouldn't believe the amount of extra work involved in putting wires in for all the extra buttons. It'd have been a horrible job.
Okay, well, don't worry about that. Using Adobe Premiere Pro will cover all of the functions of that. So the eject button was the only thing that was needed, and you've done it. Brilliant. Thanks, Colin.
While these are excellent devices for 8mm video capture via Firewire, I would recommend that if you're using one for that, leave this up. Don't close it each time you use the camera, and that will reduce the amount of wear on that flexi cable, and it should last a lot longer. Right, I'll do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now. In a world where most power supplies are glued together, it's quite refreshing to see that this one's held together with screws. So 3 screws actually, you can see the pattern there. They are secure screws. They're got a pin in the middle and it's a star drive, but that's fine. So I took this apart and had a look at the power supply. The problem I often find with these is that the mains input pins here on the socket get dry joints there, so it's worth taking it apart to resolder those. But I don't think that's got anything to do with the problem we're seeing today. This one was giving sort of clicking response from the camera. Now the power supply is supposed to output 8.4 volts. I'll do that a little bit again. It's supposed to output 8.4 volts, and what voltage are we actually getting? About 6 point something, and wandering around all over the place. Isn't that weird? Definitely pulsating. Pulsating. It's tripping, I think. So I've had a look. There's an interesting thing. The voltage doesn't die away. I've switched it off already, but it doesn't die away instantly. So that tells us that I think the capacitors and the output are in good order. And let's have a look at the voltage as it dies away on the first capacitor. And that's dying away slowly. That's the one that's straight after the bridge rectifier. So again, I don't think any of those capacitors have failed completely. You know, I'd have to take them out of the circuit to test them really, but I don't reckon the capacitors are bad. So something else is wrong. With no schematics to go on, I don't really think I can fix this. They are pretty plentiful anyway. It's not worth too much effort trying to repair this, because there's always going to be more of these than there are camcorders, since the camcorders do fail sometimes. So I'm just going to write this one off.